Perfect.
Got it. Okay. And just again, as a reminder, to make it easy, like sometimes what I'll do is I'll just click on here and I'll just say spotlight for everyone. Boom, there I am. But if someone starts talking, sometimes that pulls away. So just remember, you can always pin me up there if you need to. Pin me up there. But the plan for today, we're talking about building a team. Like we've already gone through all the conversation around what does it look like to build out your processes within sales, right? So how to execute on who are we going after? How do we go after them? Once we get them engaged with us, how do we present our solution to them and manage through the sales process, right? So we've got our playbook built out, ready to go. Last week we talked a little bit about metrics too. We were talking about what are the details around the focus for how do I measure for success and things of that nature, okay? And now it's okay. I'm gonna step away from being in the sales role. So now it's time, how do I build my team? What does that look like? How do I grow it? So when does it make sense to do that? We'll talk about what a good structure would be. We'll talk about the types of different hires that you can have in these roles. Then we'll move into compensation. And we'll talk about different types of compensation structures and really just the basics around compensation. How do we build a good compensation plan for a salesperson, whether it be the SDR or the AE functionality, that full desk person. And then we'll talk about hiring. So hiring to me is a salesperson is one of the more complex people to hire for. And you really have to come in with a plan and understand how am I going to vet these folks that are coming through this process, because it can turn into just this conversation with a nice friendly person and it's like, wait a second, I like that person, but I didn't even assess them for anything. So we have to understand how to do that the best way. We'll talk about my feelings on personality tests and how to use those in the process. We'll talk about reference checks and different unique ways to do reference checks with salespeople. Funny story, I was just talking to a client yesterday who had to let go of somebody. She was telling me this crazy story that she did not do a background check on someone. And thought, wow, this person is an exact fit for what I need. And then 3 months in, some crazy stuff started happening. And it was like, wait a second, did a quick background check and realized there's a lot of problems. So things like that to think through, like doing background check, doing the little pieces to make sure you've got all the boxes checked. Okay. All right. So let's start with building a team. I'm a big fan of founders or people that are in that leadership position early stage in the company to be doing the sales work themselves in the first part of it, because in order to manage someone and develop someone down that path, you've got to know what they're going through. You've got to feel that process out a little bit yourself. You've got to know what to expect. And sometimes if you're a founder and you just say, you know what, I'm going to bring a salesperson in, it's really hard to understand what success would look like for that. So it's really like saying, put the process in place, test the process, know what to expect, then you're ready to start moving towards hire. Okay? And building your team out. And I'll tell you 2 big mistakes that I've seen. I have the benefit of having been able to work with, I think, a little bit over 60 different EdTech companies in some mode of startup. Okay, whether they are starting to move into their growth phase or it's just 2 people trying to figure it out, and I'll say probably 80%, almost 90% of those experiences as they start sales have done one of 2 things wrong. One, they either say, you know what, I don't want to deal with sales. I'm hiring a sales leader right off the bat. Let's go. I'm hiring a sales leader. They hire this person that has 15 years of sales experience in the EdTech space. They're going to take over as the leader and they're going to run the ship. And the challenge is they don't need strategy at that moment in time in their business. They need execution. They need someone to execute and go out there and get business and start driving revenue for the company. And what happens is this person sits in a seat, is incredibly expensive, and just takes up time talking about ideas and strategizing and building plans, but never executing. Right? Because they're past that in their job. They're like, you know what, my career, I'm too good enough right now to go and jump on the phone, do the work, execute on the things that need to happen in order to drive that revenue. So that person might get 1 or 2 deals because of networking and connecting with people and reaching out to friends and things of that nature, but they're not doing the work to create scalable growth. And the only other thing that they do is they say, you need to spend more money to hire the people that I can manage to do that. Right? So I see these people waste time hiring early, big, and then they walk away from that and go, okay, I got to get rid of that person. I need someone to just execute, but I don't know what to do with it. So I'm going to hire somebody that has 5-7 years of experience in sales and ed tech, and they're connected. They know this. They've been successful in this role. So they're just going to execute. And when they hire the full desk salesperson, they spend 6-8 months attempting to ramp up and build their plan and work through the process. And again, that is a struggle and fails on them. And so I am a huge fan of building your sales organization from the bottom up. As a founder, you can go out that you're the person who's been selling right now. Like you have the passion, the excitement, you know this product, so you built it, right? And so the thing that takes up the most time and energy for you to drive scale or drive revenue is just getting out there and getting in front of people and starting to bring the leads in. So my recommendation for folks that have that are building an outbound sales motion is, instead of hiring the sales rep first, hire the SDR first. Hire the SDR and hire them to execute on prospecting so that they can hand leads to you, and take that whole responsibility off of your plate and say, you execute on just bringing leads in the door so that I can close, right? That cost to you, typical SDR is somewhere around $50K base, okay? Just costs around $50K to bring that person in. You are going to understand whether or not that person is going to be successful in most likely anywhere from 45 to 60 days. They're going to show a return, okay? 45 to 60 days, because you've listened to all this stuff, you've built your playbook, and you're handing it to them saying, this is exactly what I need you to do. Step through these phases, these processes, and execute on this stuff. You're going to know really early, can they make the calls? Are they starting to see meetings set? Are those meetings turning into good quality opportunities for me? And if they're not, move on, get to the next person. If you hire an AE, that AE is going to cost you more like 75, maybe even 80K. And it's going to take them 6 to 8 months before you're going to feel like, okay, I think we're starting to see some value out of this person. Okay? Because they're going to have to take on the entire experience of going through and managing and closing the deal. Yes, Ritu.
So for the SDR, 45 to 60 days, is that when they start getting the demos? So which means metric before that is purely just number of calls?
Calls and meetings set. Like, so it starts out with, okay, I'm going to hire somebody, and depending who you hire, like for example, the folks that I train, the reason why I'm doing that is to eliminate this timeline and to eliminate any risk of hiring someone that is not a good fit. And so what would happen is, I've already trained them on process, I've already trained them on industry, so they can jump in and just go. But on your side, you would go, okay, I need to teach you about the industry. So open up the playbook and read through that messaging framework, the personas, and understand that. That's day one. Let's learn all about those pieces, ask questions about that. Now let's understand how I solve those problems and what my product does to solve that. Now I've already built out campaigns and scripting that I just need you to follow. And so now that you understand that, let's role play a little bit, make sure you understand how to communicate. All right, we're ready to go. So typically, if you've got this built out in a really good way, you can have an SDR on the phone within like 4 days, 3 to 4 days, right? And that first couple of days is just like, get the activity in, my friend, do the things that need to be done. And then you're analyzing whether or not they're effective with their messaging and they're getting those pieces done. So within 2 weeks, we should be seeing appointments popping up on the board. And then we're going, okay, when did that appointment get scheduled for? Maybe next week. So we'll evaluate that one. And now we've got 4 or 5 of them to evaluate. We're going, okay, this is either good or bad, right? It's either working or it's not working. And so it takes a little bit of time. And if you hire somebody relatively early, which is typical SDR, you're hiring someone early in the process, it may take them a little bit of motion to get moving in the right direction with activity and things of that nature. Okay. So that's kind of the reason why I built the academy, is because sometimes it takes founders like 3 months to get someone moving in a good way. But if you do it right and you've got the playbook and you've got all the pieces in place, really, you should know 45, 60 days in, is this person effective or not? Okay.
So I'm thinking even faster than that. If somebody is making calls, you can definitely, first of all, see the productivity in terms of number of calls and the call time, right? If that input is not there, there's not going to be any output.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're going to see warning signs, but you're not going to feel confident that this person, until they go through the entire process. You may be excited about the number of calls they make, but they're not turning into anything yet. And then we're now excited about the meetings that are being set. We're getting a number of meetings set, but they haven't shown up yet. Okay, now they're showing up. Are they quality in there? Are they turning into? So all that is just building on, okay, yes, check, they're good. Check, they're good. Check, they're good. So you need to check all the boxes and not just 1 or 2. You may be able to say within a week, they're not making the calls, they're not doing the work, and I've tried to push them to do it, they're not doing it, move on. But you're not going to be like confident everything is working great until you see all those meetings and evaluate the meetings at the end of it.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Good.
And then there's this feeling of consistency. Sometimes it's like, we have the ups and downs of things. And so we just need to stay on top of them a little bit more and make sure they're consistent with it. But my feeling, and just to reiterate for everybody, my feeling is just around, I love building sales teams from the bottom up. I love building it, saying, let's get an SDR. Let's bring this person up the way that we want them to be brought up, not bring somebody in that's had 5 years of experience and we've got to break bad habits and change things and help them to learn our stuff a little bit better. Let me bring this person in at 50K. Let me teach them, develop them. And let's say about 6 months in, we're loving it. Things are going great. The person is doing really well. They've learned all about our product. They've learned all about our industry. They know the prospects really, really well. You know what? I'm going to start bringing them in on demos, and I'm going to let them listen to the demos and let them learn a little bit about that. And this person can get promoted up to the AE role, right? Because it's like, now this person is, let's develop them into the account executive who can start doing the demos for me and take that off my plate, right? So 6-8 months later, now this person gets promoted into an AE role, and instead of paying 70 to 80, we're moving this person over and we're giving them 60, maybe 65, and they're incredibly excited and they're growing with us. And there's somebody that I can go, now, instead of taking 6 to 8 months to develop, they've spent all that time in the early stages developing as the SDR and giving us benefit. And when they move into the AE role, it takes them maybe 2 months to really start to show, because they're setting meetings for themselves now. They're doing the SDR role, and that transitions into an AE role where they're setting the meetings for themselves now. And then we just go, let's backfill the SDR role and hire somebody at the low end and continue to hire people as an SDR and grow them up. That's kind of the way that I see organizations becoming more successful. And I just want to make sure we focus that it is more on, when you're doing an outbound motion, when outbound sales is the thing that you're trying to grow, it really is like, let's start with the early stage stuff and make sure the process is working, the messaging is right, we're getting the motion down. Then we move up to the next level and the next level and the next level, right? And it's really internal promotions that help me get to the right level. Yes, Ritu.
So you talked about the initial 3-4 days after joining for the orientation. So the question I have is, I was trying to do that with one of the guys. He was experienced, but he knew it's starting at the SDR level, so to speak. And he got very impatient with me. Like, oh, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? I'm ready to get on a call, because they are anxious people. And by the way, fast forward, I had to fire him this week, so he's not with us anymore. I know, so 3 weeks down the drain. But the question is, if we are talking purely about SDR role, in our orientation, we have like, okay, you do the demo back to me as a role play, so to speak, on 4th day. So, and I've been rethinking that strategy, because for SDR, you are not going to be doing the demo. My purpose was you are understanding the product, but is that something that SDRs are not comfortable with or they don't like to do? So orientation can be really short, literally 2 days. Here's the product, and here's a call script and email script, and here's the HubSpot. Go.
Well, yes, it can be similar to that. And we will talk about onboarding next week and the detail around onboarding. But when it comes to onboarding the SDR, the function that the thing that they need to understand the most is the industry knowledge around like current state. When we talked about that messaging framework, and we were saying, document out the way the world is without you. Like, what's going on? How do people, it's that process conversation that says, how do organizations, institutions work today? Where are the problems, the gaps, the issues that us as a company have come in and solved? And so it's that industry knowledge, that detail around there, that makes their conversations confident. It makes their conversations really strong. And the last part of their conversation is just a little tidbit about your product. So when it comes to product knowledge, it's not as important for an SDR to have the bits and bytes of product and really know it in like detail, because you're going to arm them with so much in that they're going to try to sell, and they're not there to sell. They're there to generate curiosity and hand off, right? So you would focus on saying, learn the industry, learn the messaging, learn the process, done. Now go execute on it. As they execute and are doing really, really well, that's when we go, okay, let's start having you learn the product a little bit more and potentially sit in on these demos and start learning how to demo it. And we're going to promote you up to the AE role in a couple of months. Like, take some time, do some of that work. And now we're shifting our focus from industry knowledge, which we've gained a lot of over the last 6 months, to product knowledge. And then now I can present on this, feel confident in my ability to talk to the product and the pros and cons and the competition and things like that, right? That's where the AE needs to then become strong, as opposed to just the front end piece of it. So you can hold that off a little bit more until you know that they're ready for the AE role. Okay. And, we've been talking about your person through each one of our sessions, right? And it was almost like inevitable that this conversation was coming down the road, that it was not going to be a good fit. And I'm sorry to hear that happened, but you know, it was probably for the best that we need to move to another person there. So
I know, and I think that is probably I'm a little bit of a person with FOMO. It's like, oh, I don't have anybody else. Don't have anybody else. I'm going to carry this paperweight. And it literally came down to when he started making some sexist comments, and I'm like, this is it, you're out. And then, yeah, and he was trying to teach me how to do sales. I'm all for that, but don't teach me. Just go do the damn job you're hired to do.
Right. Well, it's unfortunate it had to get all the way to that point, but yeah. Anything we can do to help in that area, let me know. All right, so let's continue down this path. We were talking about, like, here's the structure of the team. We want to start from the bottom up. We move to an AE, and we continue to backfill at the SDR role. Right, leading these folks, we'll talk about a little bit during the onboarding, and next week we'll talk about how to manage them effectively and what it looks like. But when it comes to this SDR AE little pod approach to it, you can have maybe one SDR that supports 3 AEs. You know, you can have somebody who's doing a lot of work on the prospecting and teeing up multiple territories, multiple people. I think the most beneficial way to start, if you have the capability financially, is to hire 2 SDRs, because of the fact it creates competition, and it also helps you understand, is it the person or is it the message and process? You know, if you've got one person, you have nothing to judge it off of or compare it to, and it's almost like there's no other person kind of lifting or pushing the other person to do more, or to show that there's capability to do more. Okay, if you don't have it, if you don't have the ability to do that, that's okay. One works. It's just, you got to be cautious of that and understand you got to work a little bit harder to push that person. Okay, when you get to a team of somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 people, it's time to hire a leader. There's too much time on your hands that you're going to have to spend to try to lead a team like that, with all the meetings associated to doing one-on-ones with them and stand-up meetings and things like that. So you have the opportunity to have a good group of people really starting to run and do their thing before you ever have to hire someone to lead that group and move forward with it. So that's kind of the basic feel of things. The only other recommendation, the only other thought process on here is that it's very different to lead an SDR team than it is to lead an AE team. Okay, so when you're looking for your first hire to lead, figure out how you're going to get a leader for the SDR team more than the AE team, because I'll tell you, hiring a leader for the SDR team is all about finding a developer, someone who can grow people, coach people. And so the main focus of that person is coaching, not managing. And in an AE function, it's more about managing, looking at data, driving things with behind the scenes with the data, and it's less about supporting. I mean, it's less about coaching. Okay. And so some people get that wrong, and they bring in a manager that is very focused on just like, here are the numbers, you're not there, get out, you know, as opposed to these are the numbers that helps me understand why. Now I can help you, coach you, develop you, and get more out of you. Okay. That's beneficial in both areas, and it's needed in this one. Okay. Any thoughts, any questions about that side of it? Okay. Let's talk about the types of hires then, because if you are at a stage where you're like, you know what, I'm not ready to build a team completely, but I could use some outside help in this. There are opportunities to do a little outsourcing or do contracting work. Okay. And so the 2 options that you have outside of building an internal team is you can outsource, okay? Or you can get like independent contractors. Okay? So with an outsource model, that's basically saying, I am giving that function to another group to run and manage, and they're going to do all the work for me. And they should be responsible for all the effort of it, campaigning, executing, doing all the work, and just reporting results back to me. Okay? In a contractor scenario, that's more of that person just fills the role of just that one spot. They don't have leadership, they don't have direction, they don't have anything. It's just, I'm going to go sell for you. Do you understand the difference between that? In an outsourced model, you actually will have a leader, and then you'll have team members that report up to a leader, and this leader will be the only person you engage with, and they will be running the entire function, whether it be the SDR function or the entire sales function. This, you have one individual or a couple of individuals, and you need to be the leader. You need to be the person who's managing, directing, supporting, helping. Okay? This one, in an outsourced model, they do it all for you. Okay? Typical for something like this at a contractor level, you're signing an agreement that's 100% commission, and they just get a large percentage of every sale, and that's it. So there's really no upfront cost to it. You don't have to pay them anything to deal with it. It's just like, I'll give you 25% of everything you close. Go get her done. And the typical scenario that I see with this are people that do this for multiple companies that have experience in the EdTech space. They'll say, I'm working for 3 or 4 different companies, and I just go out there and pitch different products and share those with people. And then if I sell something, great. If I don't, great. They don't necessarily you don't get a chance to hold somebody against a quota or a goal or things like that. It's very difficult to forecast any money or revenue coming from somebody like that. There's a lot of cons to doing that because of the fact there's really no way to say, if you're going out for money to an investor, hey, I got contractors and they're going to bring X amount of money. How do you know that? Like, do they have a quota? No. Do they have a goal? No. They're just another company, and I'm just somebody on the list. So you can't count on these guys bringing in a certain number every month because they're committed to multiple people. And it's basically just like having another tool in their toolbox, and that's it. Okay. In an outsourced model, there is a goal associated with these folks. They are taking over the entire function. They are dedicated to producing, or else you're getting rid of them. Right. So those are the 2 different models, 2 different feel to that. Okay. This is more of a monthly fee based. It's a monthly fee plus some kind of performance. And this is usually just 100% commission. So you pay up front, and you pay for the management and the work and the effort and the goal associated to it. So you can start forecasting and have this like your team. And on this side, it really is not that much. And I haven't seen contractors work very, very well for any company.
And I think, Dan, just to add to the contractor piece, one thing we also realized that if you are a new company, nobody knows you, they are not going to be motivated because it's not easy to sell. You're not selling Apple iPhone, very simple. So I think it can be a really great add-on because it doesn't cost you also much once you are established, once you have sales going.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That is exactly my philosophy on it. It is not something for the early stage companies, because they're going to be like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I will talk about that sometime. It's like, no, you won't. And there's so much energy you have to put into training them, getting them to understand your product more, focusing on poking them and saying, are you talking about me? Are you talking about me? Are you talking about me? And they're not going to do it as much. They're going to be like, oh, if I hear something that remotely sounds like you, I might bring you up. But right now, I got so many other things to sell that are cool and great, and I've already sold. And so, but when you become known and your name's out there more, and it's like, I just need to have a little bit extra in, let's say I am trying to break into a state, like I might look for a contractor that's focused in that state and add them in and say, open up that territory for me. And then I bail on that person and get my team in place when I have enough in that state. So those are type of things where it might work, but contractors rarely are effective early stage with companies. Okay. And if you don't have the leadership in place, or you don't have the understanding or time and energy to lead a bigger team, and you're wanting to grow at a faster pace, you may look at outsourcing as a model where you get something started off with someone else, a third party that then you can bring in house at a later date. You know, those are thoughts. Like, so one of the things that we do is we outsource our SDRs. We do it in a limited version with only a select group of people that we work with, only in the K-12 space. But it's a nice teach to fish model for folks that never went through any kind of understanding of it, didn't have playbook experience, they don't know the process, and they're trying to build their team. Well, instead of them tripping over themselves and failing too many times, we do the outsourcing with the idea that we're handing it off to them in the future, that we develop their playbook alongside, grow their team, they hire from us, and they move on. That's one way to look at outsourcing. Yes, Ritu.
So Dan, even on that, it's not easy. So I would love to hear your thoughts. Of course, you'll say you can hire me, but the point is I get literally 50 emails a day on like, oh, we can do this for you. We can do this for you. Because here's what we have been struggling with. So we have looked at many of these companies, including going from the, like getting references from people, hey, who you have used. It's overwhelming. It's mind-numbing at best, because there are, like I said, 50 emails I get every single day. And then it's like, okay, how the hell am I supposed to filter through them and figure out who's real deal and who's just BS? Because I have a lot of war wounds on that. The point is,
yeah.
And so, then you have to bring them up to speed. There is a high risk there too. I would love to hear your thoughts because you are in that boat. So as far as I'm concerned, I have to not only train and have these conversations going through the contract, and then I'm putting all my eggs in one basket in some ways, right? And then 3 months go by, and we put so much energy. And in that process, I'm thinking my company is losing the best salesperson it has as of today, AKA me, because I'm spending time with Dan in bringing up their team or whoever that company is. So
yeah. Okay, let me tell you my story real briefly so that you understand. Like, I've had a lot of war wounds on that area. I was in charge of a sales team where we were trying to grow an SDR function, and we looked into the outsourcing model, had so many people, same experience that you've had. And I've never had luck outsourcing, period. Nobody understood our company and our product the way that we did. They didn't take the time and energy to try to understand. They just threw people at it and made phone calls and tried to figure it out. So when I started my business, this was not the plan. I did not want to be an outsource team because I don't like outsource models. I hated them, right? And so it just, what happened was I understood the problem of hiring SDRs, and so I started an academy, and I started training people in the SDR function, but I can't train a salesperson in like book knowledge only and say you're a good salesperson. I have to have them apply the skills and prove to me they can do the things that I taught them. And so I had consulting companies that I was working with, and I just started asking them, can they make phone calls for you and do this? And then people were demanding that I had an outsourced model from that point forward. And I kept saying no to people because I didn't like it that much. But when we started talking through the things that are bad about outsourcing and how to make them better, we built our company to focus on those things. And so one, like the front end, I don't work with anybody outside of K12 because I know that market really, really well, and I'm not going to be successful outside of it, right? And so if you're going to go to somebody and do outsourcing, they should know your market really, really well, right? Then the next thing, when you onboard with an outsourced company, you need to know that they're taking the time and energy to understand you, your product, all the pieces of the puzzle. So our onboarding takes 6 weeks to go through, where we have to understand the ideal customer, building out a playbook, basically. 6-week program that I'm talking to you guys about, I'm building out all of those pieces to make sure that we have everything we need to be successful. Then if that outsourcing company doesn't give you any kind of goals or focus of saying, this is what we're going to do each and every week with reporting associated to it, no. If they don't want to take your input on things and engage with your sales team and make sure your sales team can be part of it too, no. Like that, those are the areas where it was like, when I looked at outsourcing companies and I had all those experiences from the past, it was, I'm the one person you can engage with. It's going to take me 2 weeks and we're going to have people on the phone. I don't need your input on anything. I know how to do this better. Here's my process. And they execute, and they executed incredibly poorly. So basically what we did was we just said, we're going to bring the level of expertise on process and industry, and then we're going to work very collaboratively with the company on messaging and target and strategy, and work as a team together with the AEs. And so, I mean, we've had good luck in that area, meaning we've had success. Anytime we've tried to go outside of the industry, it was not great. So we're never going to do anything like that again. We just need to focus on our industry. And right now, the outsource model to me is a necessity because of the fact that I need it to support these students. And so I don't do it for more people than I need. So it's all about the students for us. We execute on, we have 63 people on the phone. That means I can only have X number of companies to support. I can't have any more. And so I don't try to go outside of my means on that side of it. So for me, I'm up in the air. I'm somebody who's more of an advocate of taking it in-house and not doing the outsource model, even though I have one, right? And so I don't like it. I'm not excited about it, but I do know it works in the right scenario. And so our model is only teach to fish. It is not long-term support. It is not like, let's do it all for you all the time. It is, I want to teach you how to do this so you can take it in-house. And so we rarely go past 18 months with a company. We build out the plan, we work with them, we practice it, we help them hire a leader, and then we move on. So again, Ritu, I'm probably more in your camp than my camp when it comes to outsourcing. It's not been a good experience. It takes a lot of references to make me feel more comfortable about a company. And it takes me really spending time understanding their experience and knowledge in my industry and how they care about engaging with us as a company. So if I was in your shoes, I'd be more leery of the outsourced and being focused on going, I need to vet them heavily in those areas before I would ever do business with them.
Okay. And there's this high time cost of onboarding too, like you just said, 6 weeks. 6 weeks is a long time from a startup's world, right? Yep. We work on clock, not calendar. That's one thing.
Right. Right. You work hours, not weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it is a model that's tough. It's tough to get right. And it's tough to show the ROI on it. But if your ARR for a typical sale for you is somewhere between like $10,000 and $12,000 at a district level sale, then outsourcing is probably not a bad fit for you. If it's greater than that, it's almost like a no-brainer because the ROI return on that is going to be strong for number of leads that are generated and the time that you are not having to spend doing it. If it is lower than that, you got to think hard about moving down an outsource model. You need to be more thinking about taking it in-house, because the amount of money you invest in it to get that return is going to be difficult to see. So just some thoughts on that area.
Okay, let's talk about compensation. We've got all these different people that we're bringing in, and we'll talk about basic stuff when it comes to compensation.
Okay, the thing that I think about in compensation is I need to make sure that the person who's doing the role is incented on things that they can control and it's easy for them to understand. Okay, so when we look at our compensations, I'll write this over here, that the main focus is it has to be simple. Okay, if they have to pull out a calculator that has more than an add or subtract or multiply, then it's going to be they're going to be frustrated with their compensation structure. Okay, we have to make it simple, and then we have to focus on the elements that are in their control. Okay, we cannot pay them or compensate them for their performance when it's not them that's doing the performing. Okay, common example of that is like an SDR function. Someone is paying the SDR a percent of the sale, like 1% of all revenue that you teed up, we're going to pay you. Well, they're not in control of closing deals. They don't have any ability to perform at a better level to get that money. Okay, it's all about the AE's job is to close the deal, right? So if they are paired up with an AE who is historically weak, then their performance is based on that person, and then they start trying to manage the sales rep. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to only focus on the things that are in their control. So we talked about this last week with metrics, but common focus for an SDR function, the two pieces we look at are volume and quality. Okay, their job is to drive leads. We want to see how many and what quality they are. And if we pay them on those two areas, both those areas are completely under their control, and we make it very simple. Yes, Ritu?
How about the list itself, the input to that? Do they come up with the list and do prospecting? Or I know we talked briefly previously, but if we are not buying the list because we don't like to, can they come back and say, oh, the list was bad, or I'm wasting my time on people who are not there anymore, which I can't control?
Yeah, they can come back and say anything to you, but as long as they walk into the job with the full expectation of what they're expected to do, then that's just part of the role. So ideally, you want to provide them the leads to make it easier on them, but it doesn't have to be that way. Everything is very publicly accessible and has the ability, and you can say, you have a territory, you're in charge of the Southeast. We have a database of current leads that we have in that area, but it's your responsibility to update that data, provide more leads, and make sure you have enough each day to work. And so that could be a function of their day. At the end of the day, every day they spend an hour making sure they're sourcing a few more leads each and every day to get that database up. Absolutely. That's not unheard of, or not something that is uncommon for people to do, especially when the data is very public. Okay, but as a sales organization, if you're trying to create an ideal environment where the efficiencies are at their greatest, you're providing good quality leads for them without their need to intervene and try to do that. Okay, so like, for example, one of the ways that we do commission, since I don't have the opportunity to share with you any of these
tools that I have on this side. Like an example would be saying that every meeting set will pay them $20. Pay them $20 for every meeting that they set. Okay. And then for the quality metric, I like to do that in a tiered model where I say, okay, if you have 1 to 4 meetings held in a month, I'll pay you an extra, let's say $25. If you have 5 to 9 meetings, I'll pay each meeting another $35. But if you have 10 or more, I'll pay every one of those at $60. Okay. And what I'm doing there is I'm incenting what I want to get. And what I want to get is someone motivated to drive to the end of the month at 10 meetings held. Okay. And so the incentive here is that, well, if they get 4 meetings, they get $100. If they get 9 meetings, it's 9 times 35. I don't know what that is. But if they get 10, it's almost twice that amount for just 1 extra meeting. So these guys are going to be like, oh my God, I got to make some more. I got to do this. I got to make sure I get there and drive up to that number. Okay. So I'm incenting volume and saying, I still need you to keep producing, drive those meetings there. But if they're not quality, you're not going to get the chunk that is the biggest chunk. So you better make sure that every meeting you send me is good quality. Does that all make sense for everybody? Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for this. I'm actually curious, how do you define quality here? Is it deals that move through to a close, or just deals that actually might have moved into a quote and you close lost? Just to have like a little bit more granularity.
Yep, absolutely. There's a terminology that some people use, like in the marketing world more often than in sales, but it's MQL, or marketing qualified lead, and SQL, sales qualified lead. Okay, good. So when you think about these 2 different categories, I look at a meeting set. The meeting set is the first metric, and that's the volume. And that's usually categorized as a MQL. That it has been qualified as a good lead. We understand that there is a need. We understand that this person is of authority. And so we're moving it forward to sales to look at and have a conversation with. Then once the meeting is held, there's different triggers that you can build in there to understand meeting held quality, but that's usually considered sales has qualified it and said we're ready to go. I'm moving forward with an opportunity. So the way that I report on some of these things is there's a lot of organizations that get a lot of value out of starting the opportunity or the deal at the stage of meeting set, like interest generated. Okay. And so they have an opportunity or a deal created, and then they move to this meeting held and they change the stage and say demo completed, something of that nature. And so I will use that as a way to determine qualities. I will say, if that opportunity moves from interest generated to demo complete, I'll check a box, put a date, and say that is considered the quality metric for me. My sales rep just said, loved it, I'm working on it. So the SDR does not have the capability to provide anything more. We shouldn't wait all the way down until we get to close, or wait until it gets to a proposal stage. It's more of saying, did they deliver a good quality lead to that person? Yes, they did. Sales said, thank you, send me more of those. Okay. Sales said, ooh, that person doesn't even have authority. And they're like, get it back. They do not move it to the next stage. They just move it to close lost. We don't pay the SDR for that. Okay. There are other organizations that say, you know what, I'm only going to create an opportunity when the demo is completed successfully. So I just use that as my trigger and say demo completed, opportunity created equals quality metric. Opportunity created, move on, we're good. If the opportunity was never created, we don't pay them. Yes, Ritu.
On that similar front, sometimes we do demo with people who are not the decision maker, and they are tertiary fit, like, okay, but my goal is, oh, at least we are getting a demo with very simple, like Washington State University. So we just did a demo. The guy is not a super good fit, but maybe he can open the doors for us, right? And right or wrong at this point, I don't value my time at all. If anyone gives me a demo, even if janitor at a university, I'll take it. How is that worthy of compensating SDR for the demo?
You have to determine that on your own more. It's like when I look at that, I say I judge access to power as something that is acceptable to me. And so if that person is a janitor, no, I'm not going to do that. Right. If they're a coordinator or somebody like that, and they're the person who has to, you know, like you have to get through that person and they have to check you off the box because they're the one evaluating systems. Yeah, that is typically, that's a typical process where they'll go, well, can't pass you on until you pass me. And like, okay, they have access to power and you need to be granted that access by doing the demo. Great. That's I would say, yes, let's move on because there's no other entry point for me for that SDR. So I would give them credit for that. Say, you got me in the door in the right way. So it is a subjective nature to it. There's a little bit of subjectivity to it. And the other side of it too is that you have to make sure you're training your AEs a little bit more to understand what they're getting and how to judge that stuff. They can't be like, they didn't buy after this, so it was not a good lead. Like, no, you have to manage to purchase and you have to understand what you're getting. It's not an inbound lead where someone's saying, I'm ready to buy. It is somebody we have to nurture and move along in the sales process. And so sometimes there's a little confusion there where it was like, you know, that was a great person to talk to, but they didn't buy anything right away. It's like, no, it's your job to get that great lead moving through the process. Okay. Okay. All right, cool. So let's talk about AEs then. So this is the typical SDR. And again, where you go wrong is if you go off either one of these metrics and you start talking about revenue or other things that they can't control, it causes a lot of challenges and contention internally with your team. Okay. So if we stick with this, they focus on their job and they execute, right? If we go into an AE role, we have a lot more to work with when it comes to an AE. So with an AE, we are typically focusing on a percent of revenue, okay? Percent of revenue, that is usual compensation for an SDR. Plain and simple, easy stuff. We just say you get a percentage of revenue, it's anywhere from 8% to 10% on average. 8 to 10% of whatever you sell, you get. That's kind of typical for an AE. Now there's all these other things you can pull, these levers and things you can change with it to create accelerators and bonuses and different things like that. And so the one thing I would mention in here is we just don't want to go crazy with this stuff. We want to pick something that we want to drive that year or drive that quarter or whatever that makes sense. For example, let's say that we're pretty focused on generating 3-year deals. Like we want to make sure that our AE is focused on closing long-term contracts. Okay, so we call it like long-term deal, let's call it LTD. Okay, and if that person signs a 1-year deal, they get 8%. If they sign a contract for 2 years, they get 9%. And if they sign a 3-year deal, they get 11%, something like that. Right? So it's like, ooh, I've got an accelerator, and I get paid more money if I close a 3-year deal. Matter of fact, if they pay up front for the 3-year deal, whoo, that's even better maybe, right? And we think about those type of things to try to pull little levers to drive our salesperson's thought process. When they're engaging with somebody, they don't really care at all whether or not they're signing a 1-year deal or not. They're just closing to get their percent of the 1 year, right? And by the way, any of this percentage, it's usually focused on ARR. So annual recurring revenue, or it is focused on annual contract value. Okay? Not total contract value, but annual contract value. Okay? So sometimes people will take, if there's a big implementation cost for everybody, they may focus only on the ARR and say, you know, I'm going to do ARR only and pay you on that because implementation is just the necessary evil as part of it. And then some people will throw the implementation cost in and say it's a total contract value. It gets the service, they get paid for services that they sell and for the annual revenue, but they don't go beyond 1 year. It is 8% of 1 year value. Okay, so if they sell a 3-year deal, they don't take the entire 3 years and pay them 8%. Okay, they just give them a little bit more of a percentage of the 1 year deal. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, we want to keep these things incredibly simple because there are so many ways it can go all over the place and people trying to figure out exactly what they get paid. You can take every product, every unit, and try to put different values associated to things, and it gets a little bit crazy, right? So try to maintain a very simplistic approach to it and focus on, as you think about your compensation changing next year, going, what happened last year with our sales process? What do we want to enforce or reinforce with our salesperson? Is there a trigger or a lever that I can use to change this up a little bit and get them driving? You may say, you know what, it feels like at the end of the quarter is when a lot of the revenue starts to come in and they close, and I really want them closing hard every month. Well, maybe there's an accelerator for hitting a goal on a monthly basis that you give, that if you hit your target on it before the end of the month, will give you another % of your deal or 2% of your of a deal. And so that it reinforces them trying to really push hard at the end of the month to get to their goal, right? So things like that can be ways to play around with it, all right? We could probably talk about compensation for another 2 hours, about all the variables and different things, but I just wanted to give you kind of that basic feeling of compensation. If you have further questions in this area, this is an area I do have a lot of examples. I do have a lot of different structures. So if you're ever interested in taking a look at any of that stuff, happy to share. Okay.
Dan, can you briefly talk about the base salary for AEs and the draw? And do you, the other option is you don't get the commission till you recover your base salary and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some, yes, there's a lot of different ways you can bring on an AE. You can say, there's a ramp period. So you can say, you know, let's look at the first 6 months. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go 5 months. I don't have room to go 6. Okay. So if you're looking at this person, you can say, well, you're going to get a guaranteed commission of $2,000 for the first 3 months. So what that means is that if they generate more than $2,000 in commission, they just get paid their commission, or they get their $2,000, right? And people consider that a ramp. when you have a brand new sales rep coming onto your team with a brand new territory, nothing to work from to begin with, and they're coming off of another company where they've been making commission, it's like they're going to take a dip for several months in pay, and you're trying to soften that blow and say, no, I'll ramp you up. I'll get you where you're expecting yourself to be. And then Ritu, you talked about a draw. And instead of being a guarantee, it's saying, I'm pulling this money from future commissions, and you're going to pay me back later. Okay? That could be another thing you do. So this is, one of them is like a guarantee. The other one is considered more like, they say, a draw, so it's paid back. So let's say they get 2,000, and then they get 2,000, and then in here, they ended up making, in this one, they ended up making enough to generate $4,000 worth of commission. Well, you know what? They would get $2,000 here, and we draw that back. And then they get another $4,000 worth of commission. Well, they only get 2,000, and we draw that back. And now they're even with us again, and they start making their standard commission. Okay, that's what a draw is considered to be. Okay, I'll give it to you on loan, but you got to give it back. Okay, then other people will say you got to cover yourself. I don't like this one as much, but it's saying, what do I pay you salary wise every month? Am I paying you 5,000, whatever? What am I paying you salary wise? Well, you got to make that in commission before you get to take any of your commission. So we've got to generate that amount in there. And it just, I don't think that's the best way to go about. It's like, pay yourself off, and then, pay for yourself, and then I'll pay you more money in commission. And I feel like that's not a incentive, or not a big incentive for folks on the sales side. One way that people have done something really quickly, one way, and I'm glad you brought this up, Ritu, because it got me thinking about some other different things, because it can be hard to retain the salespeople. And it can be hard to find good salespeople that want to work at your organization when it's early, right? And so there's some strategies around compensation that might help you keep people and draw in early stage people and pay them less. Okay, so for example, one of the strategies that we deployed at a company called Netchemia in the early stages with us was that we paid a little bit less of a salary for them because it's all we could afford. But the compensation structure was, we gave them, it's gone. We gave them 8% up front, but if they signed a 3-year deal or they renewed contracts with us, we paid for the renewals too. And we paid 4% for every renewed contract. And so it almost became like, when they thought about it, it was like, I've got guaranteed money coming. If I close a 1-year deal, I get 8%, and then next year I just automatically get 4% for that one. And then next year I get another 4%. So I'm building up this base of people that I'm automatically going to get paid for every month. And my commission is just going to be something on top of the automatic stuff. And they had to be responsible for, reaching out and making sure they renewed and things like that. But that's easy compared to the other pieces of the puzzle, right? But it made them think long-term about the role and how they can make a lot more money later on down the road with less effort. And they were willing to accept a smaller salary to get the bigger payout in the end. Those are ways to kind of manipulate or look at your compensation structure in general to try to see what you can do to attract higher level talent that has that long-term mentality.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to pay as much.
Yeah, so one of the comments just on the cover, you called that cover, I didn't know that was the word. In one of the, actually, I think it was SaaStr blog that floats around quite a bit, and the guy talks about that cover is the best comp plan to attract based on merit. Otherwise, your mediocre salespeople will stick around because they are getting the guaranteed without doing a squat. So that was his thing. And he did say that go your commission much, much higher once they recover the base. Then that's how you attract really high performing rock star salespeople. So that was just that. But one comment I also had, comment/question, is the thing that we are talking here is like everything works out, right? This is a positive scenario. Right?
Yeah.
You hire somebody, they're here for 3 months and then 6 months and then maybe year 2 and year 3. Reality is, honestly, for me, and I've heard from other startups too, I don't think we are unique, but it's possible we are unique. We have become a revolving door. Revolving door for salespeople. That is the biggest failure I can say I have had in my company, where I could not hire good salespeople, have not hired. All this is great. SDR, AE, comp plan, retention. But I think the reality is different, where this revolving door, within 3 months, people revolve out. Maybe it's the hiring problem, maybe it's the comp problem. I have not been able to solve that. But if that is the case, how do you manage these month over month things?
Yeah, you and I probably need to talk about the factors involved in what might be your revolving door, because we could get to the bottom of it relatively quickly if I understood everything. So you and I should probably connect after this at some point and just talk through the way that you go through your onboarding process, your compensation structure, your management style, the way that you engage with these folks, all the pieces of the puzzle that, frankly, we're going to be talking about pretty much every one of them. Talk about culture, talk about, all those pieces, because it can be so many factors why people come and go. They jump in, they don't see success right away, and they bail. It's like, do we have our message right? Are we doing the right thing with things? And then see people will come and go, and it's like, man, maybe we're not managing them effectively. Maybe we're way too hard on people or pushing them in different ways. And maybe they're not seeing their compensation hit at the times that they need to, in the way that they need to. Like, there's so many factors in what creates the revolving door for you. So I would be happy to just sit down and have a conversation about those things, and we could probably nail out what the problem is for you specifically.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's move to hiring people. Well, only one other thing, one really quick thing. Incentives are different than compensation. And it's sometimes really great to have these one-off incentives outside of your normal compensation structure to focus on quick hits or quick projects that are happening. So you might be going, this is a basic example, but you might be like going, okay, I need to go to this big nationwide conference, and we're trying to drive booth attendance and get people to our booth. And so I'm going to run in a really quick incentive to say, if you, during your calls, can drive more people to come to our booth, and they come in and do this, I'm going to give you some small piece, some extra piece. It's usually some level of a cash incentive or some kind of Amazon gift card or something like that gives them value above and beyond their commission structure. Another basic example is like SDRs, for example. We're having a light week. People are not seeing results that week. And I go, you know what? First person to set 2 meetings gets $50. Go. And then it's like, everybody's like, oh no, and they run, and they try to set their meeting, and the person that gets 2 meetings jumps in and gets their $50. It's some way to drive little things like that. Happens a lot around holiday seasons and things where, people are not going to be here on Friday, and it's not going to, and you're wanting to incent them to do their best every single day, regardless of what they might have in their head about what's happening. And so we give them an incentive around that. I'll do things like, say, when everybody was in the office, it was like, okay, person who has the most meetings at the end of this month gets my parking spot, or gets the, something silly that is just like, has some trophy value to them. Like, I drove up in the front row, I'm in the parking spot. Like, I was working at a company where I worked downtown, and I parked underneath the building, and all the SDRs and all the sales reps had to park 3 blocks down in a parking spot. And so during the winter, I gave up my parking spot to the people that won. And so they didn't have to walk in the snow or in the bad cold weather. And that was a huge reward for people. I also did stuff like, if we reach our goal as a team, I'm taking everybody to this new movie that's coming out this weekend or whatever. You know, just little things to fun team level fun stuff. Those are just things we talk about. Incentives. Those are always something that would be great to add and help create some momentum. Okay. All right, let's get into hiring process. Hiring salespeople is so fun, because when I talk to founders, I talk to them, what's your hiring process? How do you go through hiring your sales rep? And they're like, well, I interview them and then I make they talk about it. But when we go into the interview process, do you have questions that you ask? No, I just talk to them and we just have a really good conversation. And oh, I liked them. I have sat down with multiple founders and said, I'm going to help you find your sales leader or find this person. And I interview with them and I sit in on the meeting to interview. And within 5 minutes, the salesperson has derailed the conversation and they're talking about their dog and they're talking about all these other things. And the owner gets all wrapped up in that conversation that 30 minutes go by and we haven't talked about one thing that makes this person a really good fit. And we get off the call and they're like, ooh, that person was great. Like, no, you liked them. That doesn't mean that they're a good fit for the role. We didn't even talk about it. We need to have them come back and we need to talk. So the number one thing when engaging with salespeople to interview them is you have to be prepared. Be prepared and have a list of questions, list of cues. All right, list out the questions that make sense for you in that role of what makes this person a good fit for you. Okay, there's two different, well, there's probably more than 2 different kinds of questions, but the ones that I focus on are there's the experienced based questions, like tell me about a time when you, and they're going to reflect back and give you their experience. And then there's behavior-based questions where you say, what if you ran into this situation? How would you handle it? Right? Don't tell me a story about the past. Tell me about how you feel about this and how you would work with this situation. Okay? That tells you a lot about people, is if you can get a sales rep to tell you stories about how they handled certain things or how they dealt with certain things. I love talking about the bad stuff because in my opinion, across the board, you don't know the character of somebody until you understand how they deal with bad situations. It's also in customer success too. Like you don't have, I'm a big firm believer that you never have a customer who is an advocate until they've experienced a problem with you and realized how you solve that problem. Because you now have a chance to wow that person. You don't, everything's normal if things are working out great, right? It's just that's expected, things are going wonderful. And as soon as they hit a road bump, a speed bump, it's like, oh my gosh, it's all bad. And then you came in and saved them and quickly blew away their expectations. Now they're an advocate for you. Now they're excited about you. And that's the same way when you deal with people too, is that if you understand how they deal with adverse situations or bad situations, and they have stories around that, that helps you understand the character of the person a little bit better. So everyone on the sales side love to talk about their successes and their wins and this great moment that they had, and they love to brag. But it's relatively more difficult for them to talk about scenarios where they didn't. Okay, and if you get a lot of responses like, well, they try to spin it and turn it into a really positive experience, and they're not very honest with you about the growth that they may have had from a problem that they experienced, might not be a good fit. right? So talk about, get a list of questions and make sure that you ask the same questions to every candidate, so that you're looking at apples to apples instead of going, that person was a great conversationalist and that person was a great conversationalist. It's like, so what? They all are. They should be. If they've been in sales, they know how to get people to talk. They know how to get a conversation rolling. Right? In these interviews, you should be 20% and they should be 80%. Okay? And the typical, like, I'll give you kind of my scenarios of how I go through interviewing people. So you get a bunch of applications pour in, right? And it's hard for me to sift through all of them if I get a lot. And so my first step really is I just send them a list of 3 questions and say, I really appreciate you applying for the role. Would you mind answering these 3 questions for me? So we can get a sense of who you are, basically. You're fit for the role. So that the first step in the process for me is I email, that's not mail, email questions, right? And what that does for me, it gives me an idea of a couple of things. One, I need good writing skills. I need someone who can communicate via email in an effective way. If there's a lot of spelling errors and grammar errors or anything else like that, attention to detail is a problem. And I'm like, oof, this person doesn't reread anything that they put out. This might be a problem for me when they're a sales rep of ours. I need someone who can represent this company in a good way. So that's a really great, easy way to test some of those things from the initial candidate. Because of the market, sometimes I don't get a lot of responses. People are just clicking to apply. And now it's my easy way to weed out people is if they're serious, they're going to reply to the questions and they're going to give me. So now I have a smaller list of people to work through. And my second step in the process is I do a standard like phone interview. And if I have the opportunity, I'll have them come in. I'll have that person come into the office. But I usually do like this virtual interview. It's usually about 45 minutes. It's best to get someone on camera, be great. Get them on Zoom and walk through my list of questions, right? I try to get an understanding of their background. I try to get some behavioral-based questions, some experience-based questions in there. And I give this person an opportunity to ask me a few questions to learn about my company a little bit too, right? Learn about the role. One of the big things in sales is to be able to say, okay, at the beginning, I usually go, so what do you know about us in this role? Tell me a little bit about what you know about our company and the role that you've applied for. And that gives me a sense of, are they taking it seriously? Have they researched the company? Do they understand what we do well enough? What are they getting? What are they doing before they come to this meeting? Or are they just throwing on a nice shirt and jumping on Zoom? Okay. If they pass this one, then I move to the next phase and I make them present. Okay, make them present. And what I'm doing in that one is I do this 2 different ways. I either make them, well, typically I make them do 2 things. And again, I'm sorry, I probably didn't preface this right. This is an AE candidate. Okay, SDRs don't need to go through this level of detail. But I make an AE present. And I say, okay, I need you to present 2 things to me. 15-minute presentation. One of them is going to be on us and our company, what you learn. And 2, I want you to present any topic that you're passionate about. Okay. The reason I do the passion topic is because when we talked earlier, sales is about emotion. Sales is about being able to connect with somebody and develop emotion, tell a story. Okay. And if somebody is passionate about something, I want to see how they can turn me and get me excited about what it is they're passionate about. Okay. I've had people present about all different things, some really fun, and it makes for some good stories for me too. But they present about the company, it gives me a sense of more of their professional manner and how they feel the organization of a presentation looks. And then they switch over to their passion thing. And it's like, man, you can see them change with their personality and how they engage with you and how they get you motivated and excited about something. It's like, man, if I can take some of the stuff that I know about this and put this in this person's head, I could see them being that way. This is what I'm looking for from somebody. If you say, present something you're passionate about, and they go, I'd like to share with you soccer. I really love soccer. Soccer is a great sport. It's like, oh my God, this is not going to work for me, right? You're telling me you're passionate about it and you're not, oh gosh. Okay, so then the fourth thing that I do is I do a culture fit. Okay, and my culture fit interview is basically saying, I want you to get interviewed by your peers within the organization. And so people that are at their level, whether it be outside of sales or inside of sales, like I'll bring a customer success person, I'll bring somebody else. At an early level in a company, when you have 3 or 4 people, it's very hard to do the culture fit, but it's like, let's get together with the group and let's everybody get an opinion on the person. But this is meant to be no leaders. Like for example, Ritu, you would not attend this meeting. It would be more of the people that are in the organization to give that person an opportunity to ask questions of the company. So you tell them, here's your chance to learn all that you want to know about the organization and whether or not this is going to be a good fit for you. Okay? We're moving you down to this role, this next step, because we think you're a good fit. Now you take some time and learn whether or not we're a good fit for you. And so they come to the table asking the questions and engaging with the people. And then I sit down with the people that interviewed them and say, what'd you think? Any red flags, anything that's causing you to go, maybe not. And that helps me see both sides, right? And then the last thing I do, usually we hire after this, we make an offer at this. However, if you want to do the last thing, there's this executive, as you get bigger and you have more, all the leaders from the different departments get a chance to interview and engage with the person. Not necessary right now. You're the leader, you're the one moving through this. But as you get into a bigger organization and you have leaders in different places, and this person who you're hiring is going to be impacting their org, they're part of the organization, you might consider adding that as an element of an interview process. Okay. So this is a typical format that I go through with AEs. When I look at those early entry-level positions, I am doing the phone interview for the virtual, and then I am doing the culture fit to check on them. Sometimes I will do because it's an SDR, it's usually like, here I'm getting the feel for how they communicate. I'm also getting a good sense of how they hold themselves and communicate here. And so then I want to see what the team thinks. If there's any red flags or anything else like that, then we make an offer. Sometimes people will say, I want you to send me an email that's selling us, or send me a prospecting cadence that you do, or things like that. And sometimes folks are just too early to understand that piece of it. And if you're bringing that kind of process to the table anyway, it's okay. Like, just get a sense of how they communicate here and here. All that makes sense for everybody. Any other questions on the interview process?
Maybe just one question.
Sure.
So do you ever do any role play during the interviews?
I have been known to do role play during the interviews, yes. Especially at the SDR role, if I am feeling like wait a second, I don't, I'm not feeling it completely, or I'm iffy on the candidate, I will move into a role play and just say, if you don't mind, let's just role play really quick on a scenario. And I give them a quick little scenario and then we role play. I usually try to put them in a more at ease situation where I say, let's do something you already know how to do. Like, you're in a role right now doing this. Let's role play. I'm going to act like your prospect. Show me how you do what you do today. And I'll act like their prospect and they do their thing and they role play the way that they typically work in their normal job today. So I do that a little bit, but when it comes to an AE, I'm expecting this to be the big, I am acting like a prospect. I'm asking questions of them in the presentation. I'm engaging with them. I'm somewhat being the heckler sometimes and like, wait a second, and trying to give them a tough hardball question and things of that nature, see how they deal with things.
Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, the one of the big things in this that I see as the biggest mistake is people just aren't prepared. They don't plan out an interview process of any kind. They go, hey, we need to hire an AE. They send a job description out and then they just start fielding people. And they don't think about all the things. They don't really put together a plan of attack, a list of questions, and really understand how they're going to go do it. But if you've got a plan, you're going to be in so much more, you're going to be in such better shape. Okay. There's a couple other things I wanted to talk about, and then we'll kind of wrap up. One is people talk about personality tests. They say, should we do a personality test to kind of eliminate people from the process? And I have a strong opinion on personality tests. This is just my opinion. But in my experience, the personality test is meant to be a way to understand how to manage someone and not used as a tool to eliminate them as someone who's unable to do the job. Okay. Some people will put their personality test right here and say, if they don't score a certain score, we're not going to bring them forward. I think that's wrong. I don't think that's helpful. If you're going to deploy a personality test, you usually do it here. And we say, okay, we think this person's a good fit. We're moving the culture. We're going to send them a quick personality test to understand what we're working with when they come in. What are going to be the dynamics of managing this person? What do they need to be successful in this role? Right? Because it's not about can they do it, it's how they do it and how much energy it's going to take from you as a manager to support them. I was in charge of a sales team, and we had a consulting company that was helping train a little bit. And they said they deployed what was called a DISC profile, DISC. And they said, you can only hire D's and I's, high D's and high I's. Those are the ones you're going to hire. I was like, no, I'm hiring anybody that I want to hire. We're not going to hire just these personalities because I don't believe that. And they said, oh, these guys can't be successful in this role. And I hired a ton of different S's and C's, and they were all very successful in the role. It was just how they were managed. I had to manage those people completely different than I managed a D or an I. It just took a little bit more energy, but they were very successful in the role. So that's just my opinion on it. And so personality tests, I feel, fit better at the end of your interview process, at the end of your process of eliminating people, and it gets down to your narrowed focus of here are my top 3. Let me see which one let me look at the personalities across the board and see if that kind of gives me a sense of whom I should bring on based on the energy it's going to take me to manage this person or how well they might fit with my team. It's not about whether or not they can do the job. Okay. Last thing I wanted to talk about was reference checks. Okay. We get down to the bottom of this interview process that we're going through with somebody, and then we say, I'd like to see some references, and call on your references. Okay. Who's going to send you references that are bad? Like, like you're not, what do you expect to get when you call these people that are references that they have? And so I have been known to do different things to get references of people. I don't call the current company that they're working for. That would be bad. I don't want to give them an idea that this person is looking, but I will look at their references, see where they work, see if that was a past job that they worked at, and then I'll find other people within that organization to call and see if I can't get some information from them. I will go on LinkedIn and look through their LinkedIn profile, and I'll see if I can get a hold of any of the other people that are on there. I may pull a few people that look like they worked with them, that they had, connections with, and I'm like, you know what, I'll try there and see if I can get somebody. I very rarely, I'm going to call the references. Absolutely, there might be something that comes out of that, but 99% of the time, I'm just getting this, they would be amazing for the role. They're such great people. And, it's like, great, super. I didn't get anything from that that helped me. And so I do want to make sure that I'm checking outside of the references that they give me, especially if it's for a leadership position. Okay. If it's above the AE and we're looking at manager level, director level, something like that, I'm checking well beyond what they've given me. Okay. And
Just one question.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Do you let them know that you're calling their former companies, or?
Not really. Because I never know who I'm gonna find within there. If it gets to the point where I'm ready to say I'm putting my bet down on this person, I'm just gonna do a little bit more research and a little bit more effort to see if I can run into anything on that side or any red flags, just to put my mind at ease. I'm not gonna go drill somebody like crazy. I'm just gonna try to get an understanding of either are there any red flags there. I'm not, if they're not working there, I don't think I'm threatening in any way. If they're at a job, I'm not even touching it. I'm not trying to talk to anybody who's working at that company. I'm not going to cause any problems for them in that way. That would make me feel bad if that ever happened. It's more of 2-degree separation. Can I find somebody that I can ask a few questions of? And then it's always good to do the background check. Some people, save money and don't do a background check, but I think a background check is good for every single role that you do. When you're hiring, you never want to be caught with something that comes up on a background check. You're just looking for crazy stuff. It's not, the person that I was telling you about at the beginning of this. So I had a background check snafu yesterday when I was talking to someone that they had to just let go earlier in the week. They had to let go of one of their employees, and they hired this person back in July. And when they hired him, they said, you know what, I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm not going to be able to start until late August. And they were like, okay, what's going on? I'm going to be out of town, and so I'm not going to be able to start until late August. Well, come to find out, the reason they couldn't start in July was because they were in jail. And that was a problem. And that only came out because of the fact that, months later, they had called in sick for over a week, and they're like, this person's not showing up. What the heck's going on? Well, the day before they started calling in sick, a warrant for their arrest was sent out again, and somebody was after them, so they weren't coming into work. So this person was an amazing fit for the job. They met all the criteria of it. The interview was flawless. Their professional background was great. Their credentials and everything else were fabulous, but they had some challenges that were unique, and those are the things that just kind of every once in a while pop up on a background check. It's better to be safe than sorry. So it's, $15 very well spent to just get that taken care of and be like, okay, good. I'm moving on.
Yeah, so Dan, I'll say that we used to do that a lot, and then it never showed anything. There were never any red flags. Normal people are normal people, right? They don't go to
Right.
jail. And then when we stopped doing, interestingly, we ran into something similar, and afterwards, and I did not even do this stupid Google on this guy. I should have. Came to know there were 23 lawsuits going on with him. All his future earnings were like given to somebody, it was like it was like, holy macro, how did we not see this? Based in Seattle, local guy, Harvard Law.
Yeah.
Crazy
Yeah.
stuff.
Yes, the world is crazy. You never know what you're going to run into. I just think it's better to just ease my mind and be good, and chances are, Ritu, it's very similar. Everybody has the experience. Like it's 99 times out of 10. 99 times out of 100, nothing's going to show up. It's not a big deal. Why am I doing this? I don't need insurance for my car. Nobody's ever going to, things like that. But it's better to ease the mind and be safe than sorry. So. All right, that's everything I had to talk about for this. Next week, or not next week, actually, we're skipping next week, going to the following week. So our last session is going to be November 3rd. Okay, that last session is going to wrap up the hiring process, more of saying, okay, we hired somebody, how do we onboard them, and how do we effectively manage them? Okay, and so for those of you who have the opportunity to be here live, think about any other topics or any other things, because that is going to wrap relatively fast. We're not going to need the full 2 hours for that. So if there's things that are just burning questions you want to bring up and talk about in more detail that are a topic that we haven't touched on yet, bring it to the table. I'm open for that whole time. I want to answer all the questions we can. It is our last session, so it's like, I want to wrap this in a really good way and make sure that everybody got what they needed out of it. And so if there's anything that you want to bring to that, just think through it a little bit. Go back to the other sessions, look through the things that you got if you're building out your own playbook on this. If you see gaps in any area, there's things that you just need answers to, bring them to the table, okay? Because the main focus is onboarding and how do we manage them, okay? Cool. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
No
Great
problem.
session as always.
All right. Well, thank